history of the Vatican is not written only with prayers, but also with blood, corpses, and scandals that defy all morality. Today, we dive into the stories of the three most terrifying popes, men who turned St. Peter's throne into a stage of pure horror. Popes so controversial, so corrupt, and so scandalous that not even hell itself would have welcomed them. It was the year 897, and we meet Pope Stephen VI, undoubtedly one of the most macabre popes in history. His name went down in history for staging one of the most grotesque and bizarre scenes ever witnessed in the Vatican. He put the corpse of his predecessor, Pope Formosus, on trial. Blinded by resentment, Stephen VI deeply hated Formosus simply because he had supported one of his political enemies. And his hatred ran so deep that instead of letting him rest in peace, Stephen ordered his body to be exhumed 9 months after his death to bring him to trial and erase him from history. Once the corpse was exhumed, they dressed him again in papal robes, seated him on a throne, and brought him before an ecclesiastical court, where he was tried, facing absurd accusations, unanswerable questions, and a sentence that had already been decided from the start. Pope Formosus was declared guilty, and as punishment, his sacred vestments were stripped off, his 3 fingers used for blessing were cut off, and his corpse was thrown into the Tiber River. This event became known as the Cadaver Synod, and it remains one of the most infamous and disturbing episodes in the history of the Vatican. It wasn't just an act of madness, it was a political move, a desperate attempt to erase a rival even after death. But for Pope Stephen, the plan backfired. The Roman people were horrified. They didn't just reject his decision, they labeled it as blasphemy. Stephen was arrested, imprisoned, and eventually strangled to death in his cell. Ironically, not long after, Formosus' corpse was recovered from the river, symbolically absolved, and reburied with honors. Another highly controversial pope was Pope John XII, the so-called Antichrist on the throne of St. Peter, a man who turned the Vatican into a brothel. And no, that's not an exaggeration. It's history. It all happened in the year 955, when John XII was elected pope at only 18 years old, leaving behind one of the most scandalous legacies of all time. From the very beginning, he treated the papacy as if it were an inherited crown, not a divine calling. He transformed the Lateran Palace into his personal playground, hosting banquets, orgies, and gambling sessions. Contemporary chronicles claim that he raped nuns, sold church offices to the highest bidder, and even toasted the devil at his feasts. John XII's actions were so outrageous that bishops and nobles had no choice but to confront him. He was accused of blasphemy, incest, adultery, sacrilege, and murder. And if his life was scandalous, his death was no different. It is said that he died while having intercourse with a married woman, whose husband caught them in the act and beat him to death. A disgraceful end for a man who had already trampled every moral and religious code. John XII didn't just betray his faith, he betrayed the very idea of spirituality. He became a living symbol of sin on the holiest throne of Christianity. A story so absurd that no one would dare invent it. And finally, we come to Pope Alexander VI, the Pope who turned corruption into a form of government and nepotism into an alternate religion. His papacy was not marked by miracles or sermons, but by bribes, debauchery, and unchecked power. His real name was Rodrigo Borgia, and his family name became synonymous with chaos. Alexander VI ascended to the papal throne in 1492. But instead of spreading the gospel, he focused on expanding his personal empire. He had children, which he not only concealed, but also appointed as cardinals. And he distributed church lands as if they were personal property, turning the Vatican into a family business. His parties became legendary. One in particular, known as the Banquet of the Chestnuts, featured naked dancers and prizes for those who collected the most chestnuts from the floor, using only their mouths. This is not a myth. It is historically documented. Although Alexander was brilliant, charismatic, and feared, he used his influence to bribe cardinals, poison opponents, and accumulate wealth that would make any emperor tremble. But it wasn't just indulgence. Alexander VI also sold indulgences, blessed wars for personal gain, and flooded the church with corruption. His reign left no room for spirituality. It was a dark era where the church lost all moral credibility. It is believed that he accidentally poisoned himself while attempting to poison another. And his body allegedly decomposed so rapidly after death that those who kept vigil over him claimed it was a divine sign of the punishment he deserved. His legacy was so scandalous that even today, the name Borgia still carries the stain of betrayal, lust, and limitless ambition. 3 popes, 3 different faces of unbridled power. One who dug up the dead to put them on trial. One who turned the Vatican into a brothel. And one who built a corrupt dynasty. Different men, yet all united by something truly terrifying. The absolute abuse of power in the name of God. And you, which of these popes do you think was the most terrifying? Tell me in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more dark tales that sound like fiction, but were more real than you could ever imagine.